The topic of viewbotting. Something that is encapsulating all streamers around the world, including me, but no one seems to know anything about it, or let alone talk about anything related to it because, honestly, no one knows who's doing this. Well, trust me, I got you covered, because I'm coming out with information which I'm 80% sure no one has heard so far, and if anything happens to me, you'll know who did it. Alright, so let's start out with the basics just so you know what you're getting into. For this case scenario, let's say you're a streamer, and let's say you have 10 viewers in your stream. And all of a sudden, you glance over at your viewer count, and what the hell? Now you have 1,000 viewers. With absolutely no raids, no shoutouts, no outside, sources, no nothing. You don't see new people coming in for a reason to, chat, but they're just there. Now, this, ladies and gentlemen, is a very, very clear case of someone getting viewbotted. But here's the case you gotta keep in mind, because there's two parts to this problem. For the major part, this is absolutely not done by the streamers themselves. Sometimes someone came in, just plopped a few hundred view bots and just let it be. It can always be someone doing this to the said streamer, and exactly, we'll get into the who part later. As for people who are doing the botting consciously, sometimes usually they have a certain backing to them, like let's say they supply those bots with a server farm, or let's say they use a live service to host those same bots both from their service onto their own stream. And for people who don't know, for roughly $30 a week, you can get the qualifications needed to get that sweet partner badge on Twitch. But hold your horses, because I'll tell you right now, Twitch has a detection system for exactly just that, and has a backlog of partner qualified streams so they can look into your specific details. So no, this does not mean you can get partnered just like that. And considering this isn't 100% guaranteed, Twitch has developed their own ways of detecting there's when viewership is legit or not. And of course, this comes out with a new update that Twitch is enrolling, where someone, or specifically streamers, can cap their viewership if they suspect that they're getting viewbotted. Simply because to accurately identify fake viewership on any stream whatsoever in real time, you gotta understand this. They risk restricting real viewers and fake viewers, and are getting more and more advanced as anti-viewbotting methods get patched and are developed on the same wavelength. So pretty much it's like a tug war between how Twitch quickly patches, let's say, detection methods, and how the opposing side responds by developing a new method to embed their viewbots. But now you might be thinking, this is all Twitch related, right? Surely this is like a Twitch only thing. Wrong. All of this that I'm mentioning right now can be done on any platform. To give you some examples, Speed had an insane South American tour stream which reached a peak of almost 2 million live viewers on YouTube, but after an investigation with private YouTube reps, it turned out he had 300k viewers. And again, in no way am I trying to downplay this. This is still amazing numbers. Absolute kudos to the guy. Or let's say you want something more straightforward. Again, another example. To quote an example, High Vice, whether you know him for Jinxie or not, has been relentlessly getting botted for the past period a few months. And mind you, he's constantly getting targeted by a certain group of people, and in no way is he doing this himself. Now I have two personal theories that can probably back this up and explain why all of this is happening. And I personally see many perspectives on this one, so for starters, first one being that all of these viewbot scandals that are happening all around are just there to prove a point. Just how easily someone can come in and send those viewbots over to your stream, and in the process of faking your viewership and letting it slip by on these streaming sites, all with the goal of to force masses to start faking their viewership. Because in their own rite of passage, they think it just works. With no smart moves and no hard work needed to be put in, just so you can plop big numbers just like that. Now, second one in particular, and it's getting to the point that some of these viewbots, in some rare instances, where regardless which server is offering them, are almost getting to the point where they're acting human-like. Alright, time to put on your tinfoil hats on, come on. This might as well sound schizophrenic. They are training them to listen and correspond to the stream interaction accordingly. Whether it's to spam sentences, emojis, or quite literally be given a profile block, which obviously will make them interact like a real person. Ranging from a simple string of code to spam a set of characters to pretty much just in order to hype out chat interaction, which can be noticed altogether very, very simply by seeing if it has anything to do with the ongoing stream or not, to almost full-blown person-to-person interaction. So a reasonable question to have right after this would have to be, well, how do you check if someone's a viewbotting? Are there any tools to see if that works? Yes, but in limited amounts as of right now, because this is an actively changing issue. There's two ways, and keep in mind some methods or tools get patched, some might as well be patched as of me uploading this. but ways of counting viewers or lurkers gets altered, for example, and the list goes on. First one is looking at metrics of a Twitch streamer, for example. Again, I'm bringing myself forward as an example because I've been affected by this. We obviously with a helpful site called Twitch Tracker, not sponsored by any means, where you can look in time blocks in their real-time real metrics. Alright, let's go ahead and pick out a random streamer. Again, whether they're botting or not, let's do Ronaldo. So over here we can pick out any streamer what you want, and what do you know? We can look at the graph of a random streamer. For example, we have a graph over here of a streamer. You can notice how their stream is both increasing in numbers and decreasing in a set period. And as you can see right here at the start, there's a huge peak in viewership. Again, this can mean two things. At this point in time, Twitch is sending their notifications to all the people who follow the said channel. So keep in mind, either this is just like, kickstarting their stream or something else, which again, that something else can also be a red flag. But obviously for a graph like this, you can obviously notice there are like humongous dips in this graph. So listen, this very much means that he is not botting. So if you want, you can go ahead and investigate and you can pick out one of these big streams they had. And for example, it stays like that for the major part of the stream. So you can go ahead and investigate on your own merit and see if you can pick out any big streamer or any other streamer that you know of who had a big stream and look off from that. One thing you gotta keep in mind is how does that graph look for a major part of the stream. And obviously, just to serve as like a little bit of a TLDR, this is the difference between two graphs, one being botted and one being much more natural. Another thing that is very worth keeping track of is set streamers' ad revenue specifically. Because viewbots in no way generate any ad revenue for a streamer itself, again, on that specific part more on later, simply because it differentiates multiple different IP addresses. And again, I'm gonna dumb this down so people who are not programmers or like tech savvy can understand what I'm talking about. So let's say you have a cluster of viewers, in this case viewbots, that are found in the same IP address. And obviously they're just sitting there not doing much, but you gotta keep in mind it does not count towards ad revenue. AKA, they're not affected by ads. And therefore, it doesn't add any dollar value to the ad revenue for an ad break on a stream. And in a more nerdy term, they aren't detecting any residential proxies. So whether a streamer A has 5k viewers or streamer B has 20k viewers, and coincidentally they have the same ad revenue, something might be fishy. Now, the second one you can always keep using is a tool called Viewer Metrics. Again, you gotta keep in mind, this is an extension that can be used on Twitch. Now, this is something you have to download on your own because, again, as I said, it's not like a very specific Google extension. Just be careful where you're downloading it from. Again, specifically from GitHub. Thank you very much. I'm pretty sure there's a full tutorial on their own end, so you can follow that. Some people have their own personal reason for viewbotting, but I'm not saying it's a viable method or it's good in any way. What I can do, however, is show you how the tool works. So basically, over here we got a total amount of viewers. Again, this includes offline viewers, viewers who are not logged in, active viewers or lurkers, so I think you can count that as 3 different categories of viewers. Now over here we got an authenticated factor. Again, I just took out a random streamer just for this part. You can do your own research if you know who this is. And obviously after this authenticator meter goes through, it gives you a final number of how many of those users are 100% real, which again is a total of roughly 35k live viewers. But now if you are suspecting that might not be the case, you can always adjust this bot threshold. Now if you click over this little what do you even call this? Now, if you click this little silly button over here, now you can adjust the threshold to see if you want to go higher or lower. But again, if you really want to go the lowest amount possible, I'll tell you right now, it's not really the most accurate. Now, let me demonstrate why. Now, over here, you can notice this stream is cluttered with 15k bots. You know how this little thing went red? Typically, this means that is like when you want to put a threshold into the most inaccurate way possible. In my honest opinion, I think like a safe threshold is around, I think it's best to say around this part if we're counting this many viewers. Now over here at this graph that you see right below is an account creation date. Now basically how this tool works is it basically registers how many people created accounts on that specific day and keeps a track of that, because typically most of these viewbot accounts were created on the same day and plastered on many live services for people to use. Now, of course, there are multiple settings you can choose from. You can either choose the normal one or the high churn, which again, high churn, it gets into the bone marrow of the entire thing. Now I think that's the best way of saying it, which again, as I said, cannot be 100% accurate, but it really ties down the number. And now you can always click on this viewer tab that's right above me to check out if there are any real people, to see if you suspected that any of those chatters might be real, might be fake, might be actually a bot account, and so on forward. Which again, I'm letting you do this research on your own, and I'm not pointing fingers and saying like, oh, this guy is doing that. Like, I'm not in a position to say that. If there's one closing part I will leave for this video in particular, if you want to adjust any of these settings, you're more free to do so. Again, keep in mind the accuracy of what you're trying to, measure. So with all this knowledge in mind, you're now ready to tackle this issue one way or another for yourself. But before you even go ahead, You might think, now, how is this a problem? Isn't this supposed to be like a good thing? How does this affect everybody negatively? Well, obviously, for starters, fake viewership. If you're gonna catch the wind of it so far, people watch streamers for their personality or their ability in a game, whether they're super good at it or for whatever else. And specifically having, let's say, 100 real people in your stream and 1,000 fake viewers is really hurting the streamer economy at the end of the day. Because someone can get an impression that X streamer is better than Y streamer just because they have high viewership, and which again is a bit controversial on its own, and very false. That which we'll get in depth later on. Because you have very much cases where we have super entertaining guys with the real 5-digit viewers. Again, complete kudos to them, shout out to them. And then you have a certain bunch where it's sometimes majority are bot viewers which overshadow real chatters in terms of a viewer count. It's like a 50-50 split between real people and bots, and the list goes on. And obviously when you have the big shots like these on a platform that's accessible by anyone, certain entities like to get involved. And they're none other than advertisers. Now, those are the same guys who roll ads on any stream that you click. And that's how said streamers get their ad revenue, whether it's Twitch or YouTube. Again, it's the same thing. Now, same people who supply those ads tend to be major companies like Amazon, specific brands, or Twitch themselves advertising their ad-free services. Which, again, it's on its own is a little bit ironic. But now, here is when the can of worms gets completely open. Twitch is funded by those same advertisers and get their major revenue from that, besides the existence of their subscriptions and affiliations. Now, considering in this day and age, the Twitch viewership is at an all-time low ever since the quarantine ended, you need to keep the following thing in mind. And the way how I say this, in no way am I trying to fearmonger or sound pessimistic, and with the current existing problem of botting, advertisers are trying to save up their losses because at this point in time, they can just look at any streamer and think, does this guy have real viewership or not? So the most logical course of action for them would be to pull out of the Twitch deal, and therefore stop their share of ads on their sites. So which means Twitch doesn't get any money, bankruptcy. Again, it doesn't have to be necessarily bankruptcy, but you know, you get what I mean. So with that out of the way, the grand question you might have is, who is doing this? Is it a group of people targeting streamers? Is it a company who's doing that same botting for select people? Now, the first one being, and the way I say the following thing, I have to be both spot on and careful in one way or another. The group name they typically go by is called the Nutty Boys. Again, this is done by the merit of my own research, because if you're to look up that name on Google right now, you won't be able to find anything. And their whole purpose is spewing hateful rhetoric in form of spam bots and whatever else they got going on. So, TLDR, Discord kitties, I guess. Now, is this worth saying? Is this worth taking into account? Again, letting you judge that for your own. And the second one, I'd say being the easier one to digest, is a random person going on a viewbotting site, targeting random both big and small streamers, and just spending probably their own money to artificially inflate your viewership. But you know, just for a tiny bit, just for a tiny bit. And really, taking all of this seems a lot. So, how do you combat this issue yourself? What can you even do? Honestly, unless platforms give their direct input in a legitimate way of detecting said viewbots and completely trying to abolish them, then there's not much that can be done. If you think about it in a certain way, Twitch is kind of benefiting from this problem, because the more viewers they get, or the more viewbots they employ on their site, you know, they can artificially inflate their gains, potentially. But this also has drawbacks on its own, which again is a whole nother can of worms to open. But again, to repeat myself, in no way am I trying to sound pessimistic or fearmonger anybody out of like to give them fear about this viewbotting problem. You gotta keep this in mind. There's just right now no defendable methods. And if we're including the soon-to-be added method of capping your own viewership that Twitch's staff is working on hastily, it seems all a little bleak. But there's one thing they really don't want you to know about. And that thing being is, don't give them attention. That's right, scientists made a breakthrough in the lab, in a place where people can give their own little piece of attention to either your videos or streams. The best thing you can do right now in the present moment is to not give them any attention. Simply because those little goblins thrive off of it. Okay to acknowledge it, but in reality, they're wasting their money and their resources on artificially inflating your metrics, with probably no good return, unless they're advanced, which I really hope it won't get to that point. I mean, you got all these programmers working day and night, just so you know. They can work on that, with probably no good return whatsoever, unless they're advanced. And from what little research I've done on this specific part, I'm pretty sure the Russian counterpart of those viewbots is a little bit, crazy. Again, do research on this specifically. Again, I'm a little bit uninformed on this part. So ultimately, with that said, them. The major takeaway from this should be, don't give attention to these little freaks who do this stuff on the low. Inform yourself and your buddies about this issue, and and most importantly, keep having fun. If you really like this video, feel free to like and subscribe for more bangers like these. Alright, back into my YouTube hole. End scene.